Welcome to the Shigeaki Podcast, where science and longevity come together to help you feel stronger, age better, and live with intention one small habit at a time. I'm Dr. Mark Hyman, and today I want to begin with a simple question. How many canned foods are in your kitchen right now? 2, 5, maybe 10. For many people, especially those living alone or cooking for just 1 or 2 canned foods, feel like the perfect solution. They're easy. They last forever, and they seem like they're good enough. But let me tell you about a patient of mine. We'll call her Linda. Linda is 68 lives on her own and has always tried to eat reasonably well. She used to make everything from scratch. But over time, with less energy, fewer grocery trips, and rising prices, she started leaning more and more on canned foods. Canned soup for lunch, canned beans or pasta for dinner, canned fruit for dessert, every day. She told herself, it's still food, and it's cheaper and faster. But after a few years, Linda developed high blood pressure, fatty liver, and constant fatigue. Not from sugar, not from alcohol, but from what seemed like harmless, convenient food.
That story is more common than people realize, Mark. I am Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, a Japanese physician and healthy aging advocate. And in Japan, we take a very different approach to food, especially as we get older. Most older adults here avoid canned foods altogether. It's not because they're trying to be trendy or strict. It's because they believe something very old and very wise. If a food is easy to preserve, it might also be easy to poison, not in the dramatic sense, but slowly, quietly, through excess salt, cheap oils, hidden chemicals, and artificial flavors that build up over time, especially in bodies that are already more sensitive.
That's what we want to share with you today. In this episode, we're going to reveal 7 specific types of canned foods we believe older adults should avoid even if they've been pantry staples for decades. We'll explain the science behind why these foods can damage your heart, liver, brain, and gut, the cultural wisdom that's helped people age better around the world, and what you can eat instead, convenient budget-friendly swaps that are still nourishing and easy to prepare.
This isn't about fear, it's about awareness, because the more you understand what's inside, the more control you have over how you feel.
So, if you or someone you love is over 60 and still eating canned foods every week, this episode is for you. Don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to the Shigeaki Podcast, and share it with someone you care about. Because even a small change in your pantry could be a big step toward better aging. Let's get started. Before we get into the specific foods, let's talk about why this matters even more after age 60. Because the truth is, as we age, our bodies don't handle stress the same way. Your liver doesn't detox as efficiently. Your kidneys become more sensitive, and your blood pressure tends to rise more easily, even from things as simple as excess salt or preservatives in your food. That's a big problem when you're eating canned foods, because many of them are packed with preservatives, chemical additives, hydrogenated oils, and sky-high sodium levels. In a younger body, the damage might not show up right away. But in someone over 60, it can quietly lead to fatty liver kidney strain, brain fog, inflammation, and heart trouble.
In Japan, we approach food differently as we age. After 60, many of us are taught to avoid what we call static foods, foods that have been frozen, canned, or overly processed. Instead, we prioritize living foods, lightly cooked, fresh, seasonal dishes that still hold energy. To many people, a canned soup or a fruit cocktail looks clean. The label says healthy, but the energy of that food is flat, dry, and stripped of life. It may fill your stomach, but over time, it can leave your cells undernourished and your body inflamed.
That's why this episode is so important. Because it's not about fear, it's about awareness, knowing which cans hurt you and which habits can quietly heal you. Let's take a look at the first 3 types of canned foods to avoid, and why they may be doing more harm than good. And we'll start with a big one, canned soups. You'd think soup would be healthy. After all, it sounds warm, simple, even healing. But most canned soups on store shelves today are loaded with salt, MSG, and chemical thickeners. One small can can contain over 800 milligrams of sodium. That's more than half of what you should consume in an entire day. Add to that flavor enhancers like monosodium glutamate MASG, and you're not just eating soup, you're ingesting a chemical cocktail that can raise blood pressure, cause swelling, and cloud your thinking.
In Japan, soup is sacred. We prepare it fresh with intention. A bowl of warm miso or vegetable broth is gentle on the stomach and full of subtle healing compounds. But a canned soup has none of that. It's been sealed, preserved, and stripped of life. Most of the nutrients are gone, and what's left is mainly salt, artificial thickeners, and shelf stabilizers. Over time, these stress the kidneys, exhaust the brain, and quietly raise inflammation throughout the body.
And the worst part, even the soups labeled heart healthy or low fat are often ultra-processed. There's little to no real nutrition left. If you're dealing with high blood pressure memory issues, or swelling in your legs, removing canned soup from your diet might be one of the simplest and most powerful changes you can make. But if salty soups are one trap, then sweet canned fruits are another just as dangerous, but a little harder to detect.
That's right. Many people assume that fruit in any form is good for them, but canned fruits packed in syrup are nothing like fresh fruit. The syrup can contain 20 to 30 grams of added sugar per serving, more than most candy bars. And yet, because the fruit is soft and familiar, people think it's safe, even nourishing.
But it's not. That syrup sends your blood sugar on a roller coaster. Over time, it contributes to fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, energy crashes, and even cognitive decline. And here's the dangerous part: many older adults are eating canned peaches or pears thinking they're doing something good for their bodies. But what they're really doing is flooding their system with sugar, often on top of BPA residue from the can lining.
In our tradition, fruit is eaten fresh, in season, and in small amounts. We never soak it in syrup. That syrup doesn't just preserve, it suffocates. It removes the light, the vitality from the fruit. And your body feels that loss, even if your taste buds don't.
So we've covered salty and sweet. Now let's talk about something savory, but possibly the most harmful of the three canned meats.
Canned meats like Spam, corned beef, or Vienna sausages were born out of necessity. They were created to last in war zones and on long shelves. But that longevity comes with a cost, and the cost is often your colon, your heart, or your kidneys. These meats are full of nitrates, nitrites, hydrogenated oils, and high levels of sodium, all of which have been directly linked to colon cancer, stroke, and kidney disease. And let's not forget, they often contain meat byproducts, mystery additives, and chemical preservatives that the body doesn't recognize.
What's so hard is that many people see these meats as familiar comfort foods. They grew up on them, they trust them. But comfort doesn't mean safe. I've seen patients with persistent fatigue, bloating, high blood pressure, and chronic inflammation who improved dramatically once we removed canned meats from their routine.
And remember, the danger isn't in one bite. It's in the daily exposure over months and years, especially in older adults whose organs are more vulnerable to salt toxins and chemical buildup.
So let's pause and review the three traps we've covered so far. Canned soups, high in salt, MSG, and chemicals that raise blood pressure and drain energy. Canned fruits in syrup, loaded with sugar that damages the liver and accelerates aging. Canned meats, preserved with nitrates and hidden fats that raise the risk of serious illness.
These may be sitting in your pantry right now, and that's why awareness matters. You don't have to throw everything out overnight. But start asking better questions. Start replacing just one item this week.
Coming up next, we'll reveal 4 more canned foods that many people eat without thinking, but that quietly chip away at your joints, your bones, your sleep, and your immune system. Trust me, you'll want to know what they are. Here I want to mention canned cheese sauce and processed dairy. At first glance, it looks creamy, warm, satisfying, like something you'd pour over broccoli or mix into a casserole. But here's the truth. Most canned cheese products have very little actual cheese in them. They're loaded with artificial colors to make them look rich and golden, stabilizers and thickeners to mimic creaminess, and a compound called sodium phosphate, which may be one of the most silently harmful additives out there.
Sodium phosphate is used to give canned cheese its signature texture, but it comes at a cost, especially For older adults, studies have shown that high phosphate intake can leach calcium from your bones, contribute to joint stiffness and arthritis, and put additional strain on your kidneys and heart. If you're dealing with osteoporosis or chronic joint pain, this kind of cheese is doing you no favors. In fact, it's making things worse.
And here's the worst part. Many people eat it thinking it's a source of calcium, but processed cheese sauces strip more minerals from your bones than they provide. You're left with a product that's convenient but nutritionally empty and metabolically dangerous. Now, if that sounds disappointing, let's move to something that feels healthier but comes with its own hidden risks: canned tuna. Tuna is often viewed as a protein-packed low-fat meal, and when sourced properly, it can be. But cheap canned tuna, especially the kind packed in vegetable oil or from off-brand companies, comes with some serious red flags.
One of the biggest concerns is mercury, a heavy metal that builds up in large fish. Cheap tuna is rarely tested or labeled clearly, and some brands have been found to contain dangerously high mercury levels. And then there's BPA, which often lines the inside of these cans. BPA is a known endocrine disruptor, meaning it can interfere with your hormones and increase inflammation.
Over time, regular consumption of high mercury tuna may lead to memory issues, slowed reflexes, and an increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases. I've seen patients with unexplained fatigue and brain fog who improve dramatically after cutting out low-quality canned tuna.
We must be especially cautious because brain tissue becomes more vulnerable as we age. Even small exposures repeated over time can affect cognition balance and emotional stability. Now let's turn to something sweeter and more familiar, but also quietly harmful: canned corn.
Corn is a comfort food for many. It reminds us of summer barbecues, warm chowders, or creamy casseroles. But canned corn, and especially creamed corn, is not the same as fresh whole corn from the farm. These products are often made with refined corn stripped of fiber, packed with hidden sugars or starches, and in many cases sourced from genetically modified GMO corn, which may increase gut inflammation and blood sugar spikes.
The problem is that it tastes so mild and harmless. But underneath that sweetness, canned corn can disrupt the gut microbiome, lead to blood sugar imbalances, and fuel low-grade inflammation throughout the body. And in Japanese culture, we look at foods not only for their nutrients, but also for their energy. Canned corn is tired food. It's been stripped, sweetened, and stored. What remains does not strengthen your digestion, it burdens it.
Exactly. And when you combine that with the BPA from the can itself, you've got a food that offers calories but very little nourishment. Lastly, let's move to something that looks like a full meal in a can, but is in reality one of the most nutritionally bankrupt products on the shelf: canned pasta or ravioli. These are marketed as convenient, family-friendly comfort foods. But here's what's really inside white flour, which spikes your blood sugar: low-quality oils and fillers that cause inflammation and sodium levels through the roof, and added sugars that sneak in under names like dextrose or maltodextrin.
It's soft, salty, and easy to swallow, but it provides almost no fuel for the muscle's brain or immune system. And over time, canned pasta meals can lead to weight gain, muscle loss, poor insulin regulation. For older adults already struggling with fatigue or poor glucose control, this type of food only speeds up the decline.
Let's be clear, these foods don't nourish, they numb. They fill the belly, but empty your cells of vitality.
So to summarize, canned cheese sauce harms your joints, bones, and kidneys. Cheap canned tuna damages your brain and hormones. Canned corn promotes inflammation and gut disruption. Canned pasta spikes blood sugar and drains your energy. These may seem convenient, but over time, they're anything but kind to the aging body.
Coming up next, we'll show you exactly what to eat instead, with safe, simple swaps that don't sacrifice flavor or convenience. You don't have to give up comfort, but you can choose comfort that heals. So by now, you might be thinking, what should you eat instead without giving up convenience? Because let's face it, for many people, over 60, the reason canned foods are so common isn't just habit. It's time, energy, money, and simplicity. So rather than tell you to start cooking everything from scratch, we want to offer easy, realistic swaps that still nourish your body without stealing from your long-term health. Let's begin where most people start their meal with soup. Instead of relying on sodium-heavy canned soups that offer more preservatives than nutrition, try cooking a large pot of homemade soup. Vegetable broth, bone broth, or chicken with root vegetables. Once cooled, portion it into glass containers and freeze it. That way, on a busy evening, you can just heat up a serving and enjoy the same convenience, but with real flavor, fiber, and nutrients that support your immune system and digestion.
That's exactly what we do in Japan. We often make miso or broth-based soups in batches and freeze small amounts. This keeps the energy of the food intact and avoids chemical stress from long-term storage. And when you defrost and enjoy a bowl, it still feels alive, unlike canned soup, which can sit on shelves for years. Next, let's address a sweet temptation: canned fruit in syrup. Instead of soft peaches or pears floating in heavy sugar, choose fruit that's packed in water or 100% juice. Even better, go for frozen fruit. Blueberries, cherries, mango, and pineapple are often frozen at peak ripeness and retain much of their antioxidants and fiber. Just take out a small bowl in the evening, let it thaw in the fridge, and enjoy it in the morning with yogurt or oats.
And that one simple swap from syrup to water packed or frozen can mean the difference between fueling your liver or stressing it. Now, let's talk about canned meats and proteins. Instead of processed luncheon meat or mystery tuna in cheap vegetable oil, look for canned fish that's responsibly sourced. Wild-caught salmon or sardines packed in water, or extra virgin olive oil and stored in BPA-free cans are fantastic choices. They're rich in omega-3s, calcium, and protein, and they don't carry the same mercury risks as cheap tuna.
In Japan, we use sardines often in rice bowl soups or eaten plain with grated ginger. They're small, digestible, and deeply nourishing. Now, for pasta lovers, if you've relied on canned ravioli or spaghetti, it's time to upgrade. Instead of eating canned white flour and sugary sauces, cook whole grain or legume-based pasta at home. It takes less than 10 minutes. Top it with a simple sauce made from fresh or canned tomatoes. Just make sure they're low sodium and BPA-free garlic, olive oil, and herbs.
Not only will it taste better, it'll support stable blood sugar, stronger muscles, and better energy throughout the day. And of course, not all canned goods are bad. But to choose wisely here are a few label reading tips. Always look for no salt, added chews products, packed in water, or own juice. Prioritize BPA-free lining for all canned goods. And most importantly, read the ingredient list. If there are more than 5 ingredients or anything you can't pronounce, put it back.
We always say if the label needs a translator, the food doesn't belong in your body.
So, to wrap this up, you don't need to change everything overnight. But even one small swap a week, replacing canned soup with homemade broth or canned peaches with frozen blueberries, can start turning your health in a better direction.
And that's what aging well is all about. Small habits that quietly build strength day after day.
So, let's take a moment to bring everything together. Throughout this episode, we've uncovered 7 common canned foods that may look harmless or even helpful, but can quietly cause long-term harm, especially for those of us over 60. Let's quickly recap canned soups loaded with sodium MSG and barely any nutrients left. Canned fruit and syrup packed with sugar that damages the liver and spikes blood sugar. Canned meats filled with nitrates and hydrogenated oils that harm the colon, kidneys, and heart. Canned cheese sauces, which strip calcium from the bones and promote joint pain. Cheap canned tuna, often contaminated with mercury and BPA. Canned corn and creamed corn, refined and inflammatory. Canned pasta, high in white carbs, sodium, and added sugars that weaken metabolism. Each of these may seem convenient. Each may be something you've eaten for years. But the truth is, your body changes. Your food should too.
In Japan, we've always believed that freshness matters not just in taste, but in energy. As we get older, our organs become more sensitive. The kidneys don't filter as easily. The gut loses flexibility. the heart becomes more vulnerable to subtle stress. And canned foods, no matter how modern the packaging, often bring preservatives, chemicals, and dead energy that slowly wear the body down. We have a saying in Japan, what stays in a can should probably stay out of your body. Because real food doesn't need to last for years on a shelf. It's meant to nourish, not just fill.
That's the heart of it right there. You don't have to fear aging. Aging is natural, even beautiful. But what we should question gently but honestly is what we've been eating for decades. Many of these canned foods were introduced at a time when convenience was prized above all. But now, we know better. Now, we understand how these quiet exposures to sodium additives, BPA sugars, inflammatory oils add up. And now, we have a choice.
A choice to go back to simpler meals, to choose foods that were grown, not manufactured, to cook in small batches, freeze when needed, and shop for ingredients we can recognize and pronounce. And remember, this isn't about guilt or fear. It's about awareness and making one better decision at a time.
So, if you've been depending on canned foods, you're not alone. But if you're listening to this, you're also ready to take the next step. Start by replacing just one canned item this week. Try a homemade soup. Choose frozen fruit instead of syrup. Grab BPA-free salmon instead of processed meat. You deserve food that's alive, not shelf-stable for decades.
And your body will respond with more energy, clearer thinking, stronger digestion, deeper sleep. That's the beauty of change. It doesn't have to be extreme, just consistent.
And if this episode helped you, please take a moment to like this episode, subscribe to the Shigeaki Podcast, and share it with someone you care about, especially someone who's just starting their journey to better eating after 60. Because one small change in your pantry can create a big shift in how you age. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time here on the Shigeaki Podcast.